She deserves a real man after hours, Carson said with a grin slicker than the gel in his overcombed hair, raising his glass like a frat boy who'd just landed the punchline of the night. The laughter was immediate. Too loud. Too eager. It spilled around the table like cheap cologne, coating every suit and sequin-dressed executive with that familiar stink of corporate hypocrisy. And then came the part that snapped something clean in half inside me. My wife laughed too. Not a nervous laugh. Not a polite chuckle. No, she laughed like it was the most natural thing in the world to hear another man imply she was available after business hours. Worse, she leaned into his shoulder. Like they shared something. Like I didn't exist. I didn't flinch. Not then. I just took a sip of water, ice tapping the rim of my glass. No wine for me tonight. I wanted to remember every word, every expression, every misstep they thought was harmless. I scanned the table. 8 people. 4 from her firm. 3 plus ones. And Carson, the hyena in a custom suit, leading the pack. I counted every name tag, matched every face to the research I'd already done. This wasn't a room of strangers. This was a collection of threads, and I had every needle ready. My wife didn't look at me once after the joke. Not once. She was too busy riding the wave of professional approval, letting her colleagues validate her by proximity to the office jester. The same jester who thought it was funny to grope interns at last year's retreat. I'd read the complaint. I knew the outcome. Swept under the rug by the same board currently toasting him as the next big thing. I let them talk. Let them pour more wine. Let them believe I was just the quiet, disposable husband in a rental tux. That's always been my favorite part, when people assume silence means insignificance. She had introduced me as just a guest. Not her husband. Not her partner. Just a guest. I watched as she skipped over my name like it was inconvenient. As if the 12 years of marriage and the 2 surgeries I'd driven her to didn't fit tonight's aesthetic. And honestly, that suited me just fine. Because when people forget you're there, they stop filtering what they say. And tonight, that slip would cost them more than they could imagine. By the way, if you're still listening and haven't subscribed, now's a good time. Most of you don't realize how much it helps the team. We tell stories that cut deep, and your support keeps them coming. Carson kept running his mouth, lubricated by French wine and unchecked ego. He told a story about his last ski trip with the team, conveniently forgetting to mention that half of said team wasn't invited. His laugh was the kind that came with expensive dental work and zero self-awareness. Every time he looked at my wife, there was a glint in his eye that wasn't professional. The same glint I saw in her 2 weeks ago when she came home, late from budget reviews. Her lipstick had been smudged and her perfume, usually subtle, was choking the hallway. Back then, I said nothing. Filed it away. Tonight confirmed it. The gala was at the Arlesian Grand. 14-foot ceilings, black tie only, waiters moving like ghosts between the tables. Her firm went all out. It was their annual investor relations night, showcasing their top execs, most promising division heads, and charming social faces. My wife was all 3, the rising star of business development, groomed by the board, glowing with ambition, and I was the accessory she no longer needed. Until now. Behind me, 2 senior directors discussed acquisition rumors, nervously. They didn't know I could hear. They never imagined the guest at the end of the table knew the numbers they were worried about better than they did. Knew the clauses buried in the merger contracts. Knew exactly who held voting rights across 5 shell corporations quietly accumulating leverage. You see, what no one at this table realized, not even her, was that I'd never stopped working. While she climbed the ladder and soaked in applause, I built something else. Something not meant for LinkedIn or public filings. My name wasn't on the masthead, but it was on the ownership documents. And Carson? The man who thought it was funny to challenge another man's worth with a wink and a joke? He was bragging about a ladder I owned 3 rungs of. Still, I smiled. Still, I said nothing. Still, I listened. Because the most valuable currency in that ballroom wasn't stock or prestige, it was perception. And tonight, they had decided I didn't matter. I watched my wife sip from her glass, still glowing under the soft lights. I could almost hear her thoughts. He's quiet. He won't make a scene. He knows this is my world. She was right. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to pull the curtain. Carson had the kind of voice that got louder the longer he talked, like he was trying to fill every corner of the room with his own echo. It's not official yet, he said, puffing his chest like a cartoon hawk. But let's just say the board basically begged me to take point on the integration. He grinned like he'd just won the Heisman. Between us, they can't risk a misstep with this investor. Too much riding on it. They need someone they trust. Someone who gets the culture. My wife practically melted. That's amazing, Carson, she cooed, brushing imaginary lint off his lapel. Her hand lingered just a second too long. They're lucky to have you. He smirked. Yeah, well, I try to be humble. The table chuckled. I didn't. Not because I wasn't amused, but because I was watching. Watching how easily people give away their positions when they think no one's keeping score. Carson didn't know the investor he was name-dropping was already in the room. And the investor didn't know the man being considered to lead his integration deal had just publicly implied he was sleeping with one of the firm's rising executives at a gala designed to secure future funding. He hadn't just cracked a joke anymore. He'd tripped the wire. I reached into my coat pocket. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just calm and exact. The phone unlocked with a quick scan of my thumb, and I opened the app I'd built 2 years ago. Bare bones. Encrypted. No logo. Just one button. The screen glowed faintly. Trigger integration review. I tapped. That was all. 1 second. One signal. Sent directly to a device only 2 others carried. Both inside this building. Both waiting for that moment. Across the ballroom, seated at a far corner table no one had paid attention to all evening, a man in his late 60s stirred. His suit was tailored, but quiet. His face, sharp but unreadable. His name didn't appear on the guest list, because that list was a prop. His phone buzzed. One glance. No alarm. Just the briefest nod to himself. Then, with methodical grace, he turned, slowly, toward our table. No one noticed but me. Carson was still basking in his own glow. And between us, I've already had 2 private chats with the CFO, he said. He all but called me the future. They're just figuring out the timing now. I watched the man at the far table stand. Smooth. Deliberate. He adjusted his cufflinks. Looked around the room like someone surveying a chessboard. Not for entertainment, but for flaws. Carson raised his glass again, oblivious. Anyway, I'll probably be flying to DC next week to meet the full group. If they like me, it's a done deal. My wife nodded along like she was co-signing history. The older man, now walking slowly toward the executive corridor, passed by the COO, whispering something too softly to catch. The COO stiffened, checked his phone. Carson kept talking. Honestly, I think they're just waiting to make sure the team is clean. No drama. No perception issues. Once we pass optics, it's game over. Oh, Carson, you sweet, arrogant idiot. He didn't realize the optics were already shattered. He'd walked into the final exam with a joke about sleeping with the teacher's wife written on his forehead. My wife glanced at me for the first time that evening. Just briefly. Something in my stillness made her blink. I wasn't seething. I wasn't sulking. I was present. And if you know anything about power, you know presence is everything. She turned back to Carson, suddenly less enthusiastic. She didn't know why yet. She just felt it. And she was right too. Because what Carson didn't know, and what she had long since stopped caring to ask, was that the group supposedly begging him for leadership wasn't evaluating him anymore. They were auditing him. And the man who started it wasn't a faceless figure from a boardroom in New York. He was sitting 6 inches to Carson's left, dressed in a rented tux, nursing a glass of water, and remembering every word. The best part about staying invisible is no one ever thinks to ask where the mirrors are pointed. She never asked what I did. Not really. In the early years of our marriage, she'd try to play the supportive wife. How was work, babe? Or, are you still consulting for that fund? But her eyes always wandered when I answered. She wanted headlines, not footnotes. And when I didn't provide flashy titles or executive summaries, she filled in the blanks with whatever suited her version of reality. Over time, she just stopped asking altogether. Somewhere around year 5, she started saying things like, "You're so lucky to not have corporate drama," and "must be nice to work from anywhere." Sure, if working from anywhere includes conference calls with banks in Zurich at 3 a.m., or restructuring South Korean shipping assets before breakfast. She never saw the spreadsheets. Never saw the NDA folders I carried on encrypted drives. She never asked what minority board access rights meant when it showed up on a letterhead addressed to me from a law firm she'd never heard of. And I never corrected her. Because correcting her meant she'd start paying attention. And when people start paying attention, they stop being predictable. I wasn't just some finance ghost floating between M&A meetings. I was the silent partner behind a shell conglomerate called Lornis Equity Holdings. Lornis didn't appear on any signage. Didn't run ads. Hell, it didn't even have a website you could access without routing through a VPN. But it did hold 39.4% of pending assets in her firm's acquisition trail. In 2 months, pending a board vote, it would jump to 51. The vote would be public. But the power? The power had already shifted the moment I tapped the app. That app, not a tracker, not a text bomb, just a simple trigger. A secure notification protocol, military-grade encryption, off-the-shelf visuals. Designed only to say, begin. The moment I hit it, two things happened. First, the man across the room, Marvin Kellis, the senior advisor who carried more clout than her entire board combined, stood and moved toward the private lounge. Second, a live folder was unlocked in the review server of Lornis Acquisition Committee. A folder marked Real-Time Cultural Integrity Review. Carson's name was the top of the file, and hers was number 2. What none of them understood was how meticulous my systems were. I didn't deal in guesses. I didn't build on charm or cocktail promises. Every stake I made came with silent surveillance, optics, behavioral indexes, insider feedback forms. Their firm? It had scored in the yellow for executive maturity twice in the last year. They were skating on image and overvalued metrics. But the numbers lied. I had the real margins. They were sinking. Slowly. Elegantly. The kind of decline that's invisible until it's irreversible. Carson's bragging about being the board's choice for integration? That was the kiss of death. You never want to be the name in the room before the deal is finalized. Visibility makes you expendable. And anyone foolish enough to flaunt their position before it's secured, that person gets flagged. And the woman who smiled while he made a sexual joke at a gala in front of investors? That woman became a liability. The irony? She used to be sharp, calculated, but power made her sloppy. Just like it did to him. Just like it does to everyone who thinks they've already won. I looked around the table again. Each of them so sure they understood who mattered and who didn't. None of them noticed that 3 tables away, Marvin Kellis had just entered the VIP conference suite. That within minutes, HR would begin preparing optics files. That legal already had a time-stamped record of every inappropriate comment made within 100 feet of that camera-embedded centerpiece. No one was yelling. No one was slamming fists. That's not how real takeovers happen. They happen like this. A nod, a tap, a shift in air pressure. I sipped my water again and adjusted my cufflinks. Not out of nervousness, out of habit. The threads in my jacket were tailored to the millimeter, just like the clauses I'd hidden in Section 8B of the acquisition paperwork. They'd never see it coming, because in their eyes, I wasn't even in the game. Just a guest, just a ghost, the kind that haunts boardrooms and balance sheets. It happened midward. Carson was knee-deep in another tale about how indispensable he was to the merger, how he'd single-handedly stabilized the New Haven office by threatening to pull funding from a misaligned R&D initiative, whatever that meant. It was all noise to him, but the table ate it up like gospel. That is, until the COO passed behind us. Not directly, not obviously, but just close enough for Carson to catch the movement. And then the shift. The COO, a composed woman in a deep navy dress and the kind of posture you only earn from 20 years of crisis mitigation, slowed as she passed our table. Her eyes flicked sideways for the briefest second and locked. Not on Carson, not on my wife. On me. A half-beat pause, then a full stop. She blinked, looked again. Her lips parted just slightly, not surprise exactly. More like recalibration. Then she turned sharply and leaned in to whisper to a junior executive behind her. And that's when it started unraveling. The junior exec stood like a puppet yanked by an unseen string and walked briskly toward the lounge doors at the far end of the ballroom. Eyes forward. No detours. Carson hesitated. What's that about? He asked no one in particular. But no one answered. Because just then, the older man from across the room, the one no one had noticed earlier, rose from his seat. Not rushed. Not dramatic. A quiet elegance. The kind that draws attention only from those who know what that kind of elegance costs. He brushed a lint thread from his sleeve, turned in our direction, and began walking. Straight, smooth, purposeful. And then, right before he disappeared behind the velvet curtain separating the main hall from the executive suite, he turned his head, looked directly at me, and nodded once. I returned the gesture. Not a smile, not a bow, just acknowledgement. Like two men shaking hands across a chessboard that no one else could see. Carson saw it, and for the first time that evening, his voice faltered. Wait, what just happened? He mumbled, his smirk cracking at the edges. My wife glanced between us, her brow furrowed. Who is that? She whispered, confused, trying to keep her voice light, like this was just another gala curiosity. Her eyes scanned my face, searching for reassurance. Or maybe denial. I gave her neither. I let the silence stretch. Let the atmosphere settle into discomfort. Let her feel, for once, how it felt to be excluded. Then came the click of polished shoes behind us. Her CEO, not the firm's VP, not the head of communications, The actual CEO. 6'2", salt and pepper hair, a face worn into permanent gravitas. He didn't look at her when he approached, didn't greet the table. He locked eyes with me, gave the smallest nod, professional, restrained, then turned to the table at large and said, flatly, "Apologies for the interruption." Everyone quieted. Even the violins near the stage seemed to hush. He didn't address Carson, didn't acknowledge my wife. Instead, he looked at her wine glass, the hand holding it, saw the slight tremble, then looked up at me. And finally, to her, he asked one question. "Do you know who he just nodded to?" She blinked. Her lips parted. "My husband." It was half question, half defense. The CEO gave a tight smile. Not kind, not warm. A lawyer's smile. No, that was Marvin Kellis, Strategic Operations Chair for Lornis Equity Holdings. The name dropped like a piano onto the table. Every executive within earshot turned. Forks froze midair. Someone audibly gasped. Carson stared at me like I'd just peeled off a mask. And my wife, my wonderfully ambitious, performative wife, looked like someone had just hit her with a name she was supposed to know but didn't. "Lornis," she started. But the CEO cut her off. "The firm currently assessing our valuation. The one you've been asking to present to." I could feel her spine straighten, her breath catch. Carson went rigid. "Wait," he muttered. "That guy? Here." "He was here," the CEO replied. "Now he's upstairs. With the board. Because someone just triggered an early review window. Effective immediately." Then, for the first time all evening, the CEO finally looked at Carson and frowned. The mood shifted like someone had cracked a window in winter. The music kept playing. The wine still flowed. But the table? The table froze. Because suddenly, the man they thought was just a tag-along wasn't. And the room didn't orbit Carson anymore. It had already tilted toward me. The music kept playing, but the laughter stopped. It was like someone had sucked the oxygen out of the center of our table and left us all blinking in slow realization. Her CEO hadn't made a scene. He didn't have to. A single question, delivered without ceremony, had done more than any outburst ever could. And my wife, always so rehearsed, so composed, was suddenly grasping for footing in heels too tall, in a room that no longer saw her as the star. She looked at me, eyes darting, the corners of her smile stiff like they'd been glued on. "Wait," she said, more to herself than anyone. "He's talking about you, right?" No one answered. Her CEO didn't blink. "Do you know who he just nodded to?" A slight tremor in her hand. "My husband," she offered, as if naming me would restore some kind of order. He shook his head, slowly. "No, the man who just triggered our board review." Silence. Carson's wine glass clinked softly against the base of his plate. His face went so pale he looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "Board review," he echoed. "Tonight." The CEO didn't answer him either. He was still watching my wife, measuring her response, not her words. That was the thing about people who spend their lives in rooms like these. They read weakness faster than resumes. And right now, she looked like a freshman standing in front of a panel she never studied for. She turned to me again, whispering sharply, "What did you do?" I didn't answer. Because if I had, she'd start to understand how little she actually knew about me. What they never realized, what even she never thought to ask, was that I never stopped building after I stepped out of the spotlight. I didn't vanish into some background role. I went subterranean. Deep equity, debt portfolios, licensing leverage. I found power where no one was looking because no one wanted to look there. And now, tonight, in a room full of people who'd spent the last 5 years cultivating image and proximity, I held the one thing none of them could fake: authority without performance. Carson tried to salvage it with a joke. "Okay, this is a little dramatic, right? I mean, it's a gala." He laughed nervously. No one joined him. The CEO shifted his attention for the first time. "Carson, legal flagged an email chain this morning. Your remarks from last week's leadership summit were appended to an HR summary. Accidentally, we thought. Now I'm not so sure." Carson froze. What remarks?" The CEO raised an eyebrow. "The one where you called that junior analyst sugar shorts and asked if she wanted to debrief you in private." My wife's eyes widened. "You said that." But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me. "No," Carson said, almost breathless. "I mean, I didn't know that went beyond." "You didn't know who was watching?" I said softly. He blinked at me. "Wait, so you're with Lornis? You're the—" Like I said, I interrupted. "You didn't know who was watching." The color drained from his face completely. He set down his glass too fast, and it tipped, spilling red wine across the linen in a slow, ugly spread. My wife tried to dab at it with a napkin, like she could erase it. Like she could fix this with hospitality. The CEO gave her one last look, almost pitying. You told the board he was just your plus one. That he didn't work in our sector. That he wasn't relevant. She swallowed. You also vouched for Carson. Her mouth opened, then closed. I hope you understand what this means for both of you, he said, stepping back. Then he was gone. Just like that. One by one, the eyes around us stopped pretending not to watch. The whispers started, soft, coded, but unmistakable. The napkin in her hand was shaking now, wine soaked through it, bleeding into her fingers. I leaned in. You were so eager to distance yourself from me, I said calmly, that you didn't stop to ask why I was in the room. She turned toward me, eyes pleading now. Why are you in the room? I smiled. Because I put it on the calendar. And then I stood up. No announcement. No toast. No revenge speech. Just motion. I buttoned my jacket slowly and gave a slight nod to the maitre d' as I passed. He returned it with a practiced smile. He knew who I was. Unlike her. Behind me, I could hear her calling my name. Not loudly. Not yet. But that would come. Soon. In the ballroom, nothing seemed wrong. The chandeliers still glowed like champagne frozen mid-pour. The waitstaff still danced between tables with trays of canapes and polished smiles. The quartet played a piece from Vivaldi, and guests chuckled at polite anecdotes about overseas retreats and IPO dreams. On the surface, the gala floated on like a perfect illusion. But underneath, the wires had started buzzing. Upstairs, in the executive suite, behind the double doors where laughter never dared enter, the boardroom monitors lit up with a synchronized sequence of alerts. Each board member's private terminal pinged at once. Not a group email, not a broadcast, a priority level, encrypted signal. Internal, pipeline review, trigger level 3. Recommendations loaded in real time. Carson's name, highlighted in amber. Below it, public conduct concerns. Reevaluate suitability for integration leadership. Potential conflict with investor relations. Attached was a 14-second video clip, time-stamped, from the ballroom security feed. It showed Carson raising his glass and delivering his line. She deserves a real man after hours, with her laughing beside him, her leaning into his shoulder, her wine glass raised in unison. No context, just behavior, just optics. Below the footage, recommendation, suspend pending promotion. Initiate informal review. 2 seconds later, her name appeared, not in amber, in red. Proximity risk to flag leadership candidate. Compromised perception during investor-facing event. Possible conflict of interest given personal relationship with Lornis advisor. Another clip, this time, of her reaction, her smile, her touch, her dismissive hand wave as I was introduced simply as a guest, followed by her CEO's entrance and the moment her expression cracked. No commentary, no editorializing, just the footage. And beneath that, leadership maturity under question. Meanwhile, down below, Carson was trying to restart a conversation, any conversation. Something about Q1 projections, hoping to redirect the mood. No one bit. The murmurs had started at the edges of the room. VPs looking at their phones, then at the table, then quietly excusing themselves to take calls that weren't calls. It was the corporate version of rats checking lifeboats. Then Carson's phone buzzed. He fumbled for it, still talking, trying to sound relaxed. When he saw the sender ID, Corp OPS priority internal, he went quiet. His fingers hovered above the screen, then slowly set the phone face down on the table. He didn't open it. Neither did she. Her phone buzzed next, vibrating against the polished wood. She glanced down, froze. One buzz, then another, then a third. Her eyes didn't move from the screen, but she didn't unlock it either. Because somewhere deep inside, she already knew. The older man, Marvin, had vanished from the room 10 minutes earlier. No goodbyes. No trail. Just gone, like smoke off a mirror. He didn't need to stay, because the machine was already moving. I was halfway to the exit when I saw the next wave hit. The COO discreetly entered the ballroom again and began making quiet rounds, first to a table of junior executives, then to a cluster of portfolio heads. Each exchange was brief. Each one ended with a subtle nod, and the recipient quietly standing up, drink unfinished. Carson finally reached for his phone again, tapped the screen open, and read. He didn't blink for a while. Then he cleared his throat. I need to call someone real quick. No one responded. He pushed his chair back, slowly. As he rose, his legs wobbled, not from alcohol, from the cold wash of knowing. The same kind of knowing that comes when you realize the spotlight you fought so hard for just turned into a sniper scope. My wife hadn't moved. She was staring straight ahead, her face flushed but frozen. Her fingers still gripped the stem of her wine glass, but she wasn't drinking. She was calculating. Too late. Because the review wasn't coming. It had already begun. She turned toward me again, like maybe I'd stayed close enough to fix this. Like maybe this was just one of my silent little games. But I wasn't there. I was gone. And in my place? Just the seat. Empty. Waiting. Like something had been removed on purpose. The table that once roared with laughter began to die in pieces. Not with a crash, but with careful, practiced exits. The first to go was Lauren Kim, senior strategy officer, whose laugh had rung a little too hard at Carson's joke earlier. She checked her phone, widened her eyes just slightly, then offered a plastic smile. Just going to check on the dessert arrangements, she mumbled as she stood. No one stopped her. Then came Marcus from M&A. Need to call the driver, he said, not even pretending to make eye contact. Then two more, then three. Their chairs scraped softly as they left behind half-finished glasses and untouched plates, like animals fleeing a forest minutes before the fire hits. There wasn't panic, just urgency disguised as etiquette. My wife tracked each of them like she was watching her social capital hemorrhage in real time. Her hand tightened around her napkin so hard it wrinkled like a crushed receipt. She leaned toward me finally, her voice sharp but hushed. What did you do? I looked down at the candle flickering between us. Still untouched. Wax running in slow patterns over silver. The flame curved in one direction, small draft. People moving. Doors opening. Tables clearing. I said nothing. What did you do? She asked again, this time with less confidence, like even she didn't believe the words carried weight anymore. I looked up at her slowly, met her eyes. Not angry, not smug, just calm. The kind of calm that doesn't need to speak, because everything has already been said, just not out loud. Across from us, Carson pulled out his phone again, the same one he'd been dodging for the past 10 minutes. His thumbs hovered before tapping into his email. Then he froze. Why is legal CC'd on this? He muttered to no one. His forehead beaded with sweat. He pulled at his collar. Then he started scrolling faster, like if he moved quickly enough, he could scroll out of reality. Then, behind him, heels on marble, the COO had returned. This time she didn't circle the room. She came straight to our table. Mr. Taylor. Ms. Heron, she said, crisp but not unkind. We need a quick word. Upstairs. She didn't wait for them to process it. She simply stepped aside, expecting motion. Carson stood, nearly knocking his chair into the next table. His jaw opened, but nothing came out. My wife blinked like she'd been slapped mid-dream. She turned to me again, this time whispering like it might still be salvageable. Please, she said, tell me what's happening. Still, I said nothing. Because at that point, she already knew. She just hadn't admitted it to herself. She stood slowly, trying to save face, adjusting her dress, composing a smile that now looked like it had been painted on with shaking hands. Carson was pale, jittery, like he was walking into a review board naked. They followed the COO toward the executive lounge. No one clapped. No one watched. That was the point. In this world, the silence of others is the sound of your relevance dying. The last one left at the table was me. I didn't stand, didn't raise my glass, didn't even blink. I just sat there, watching the candle. Wax still dripping. Steady. Unbothered. The executive lounge was colder than the rest of the ballroom, both in temperature and temperament. Stark walls, glass partitions, the kind of lighting designed to wash out the soul from your face during a reprimand. No violin music here. No flutes of champagne. Just the hum of air vents and the low murmur of controlled destruction. Carson went in first. They separated them, deliberately. He was escorted into the inner conference suite where 2 board members and a representative from legal were waiting. One screen already displayed a still frame from the security footage. His stupid grin frozen mid-toast. My wife's hand visible on his shoulder. The timestamp glowed like a countdown. She waited in silence in the hallway, arms folded, lips pressed together, pretending not to be afraid. The door opened 12 minutes later. Carson came out white as a ghost, jacket wrinkled, muttering to himself. He didn't look at her, didn't say a word, just walked past with the slow, broken gait of someone realizing he was never going to climb another rung in his life. Then they called her in. 2 members of the board were already seated when she entered. The third was the head of people and culture, the one who didn't care about quarterly performance, only headlines and reputational heat. The woman didn't offer a handshake. Ms. Heron, she began, fingers laced together on the table. Do you understand why you're here? Ah, yes. I think so, my wife said. But I want to clarify that what happened was just a misjudged moment. Champagne. Banter. There was no inappropriate behavior, nothing formal. It was, stop. The woman raised one hand. We've reviewed the footage. Not just the security feeds, but the dozens of phones that caught the toast, including the ones uploaded to internal Slack threads. The joke was inappropriate. The laughter was reinforcing. You leaned into it. It wasn't like that, she insisted. It was just, the issue isn't intent, the board member interrupted. It's optics. You were seated with an investor contact, a man the board considers a critical silent advisor. And when one of your peers insulted his position in your marriage, you laughed. You reinforced that message in a public-facing environment. That's not judgment. That's a cultural liability. But I didn't know who he really was. The silence in the room felt like a verdict. Another board member finally spoke. Perception is leadership, Ms. Heron. And you failed both. That was it. No raised voices. No slammed fists. Just the kind of death sentence that only comes from quiet decisions. When she stepped out of the room, her heels sounded louder than before. Like everyone could hear her now, but not for the reasons she once dreamed of. Her eyes were wide but hollow, mascara beginning to smudge, foundation cracking under the pressure of failure she never saw coming. She walked back into the ballroom expecting to find something. Maybe me. Maybe Carson. Maybe just her reputation, resting politely at the table where she left it. But all she found was absence. Carson was nowhere. The COO had returned to other matters. The table? Cleared. The only thing left in our place was a candle, still burning low. And her name card? Gone. Removed so neatly, so cleanly, it was as if she'd never been there at all. She stood there for a few seconds, just long enough to make it awkward. One or two people noticed, but quickly looked away. That's how it works. In these circles, collapse is never acknowledged, just avoided. She didn't sit. Couldn't. She backed away slowly, her breath catching, trying not to show the tremble in her hands. She thought about calling me, then realized she didn't even know which number I'd answer. Because the man she dismissed, the quiet one, the boring one, the guest, hadn't just left the table. He'd erased her seat at it. The statement went out just after 7 a.m. Monday morning, timed perfectly to hit inboxes before the first coffee had cooled. It came from Executive Communications, a sterile subject line that masked the weight of what followed. Pending board restructuring, several promotions and public-facing roles are suspended until further notice. Internal leadership reviews are underway to ensure alignment with investor standards and firm conduct policy. No names, no direct accusations. But in that world, you didn't need names. Executives are like chess pieces. When one vanishes from the board and no one talks about it, that's all the talking that needs to happen. Inside her firm's Slack channels, messages stopped mid-thread. The Monday morning syncs were canceled with no explanation. A few bold ones whispered in private DMs, but the tone had changed. There were no jokes anymore. No emoji reactions. No gifs of Carson slapping his chest and yelling, "Future CEO." Instead, people posted neutral status updates. People reread the HR handbook. People quietly reviewed their LinkedIn privacy settings. And behind all of it, a quiet awareness pulsed like electricity beneath the floorboards. They'd watched a public execution that no one dared call by name. Carson's calendar appointments disappeared first. His company badge was deactivated by 9:20 a.m. By 10 o'clock, his office had been cleared out by security under transition protocol. He didn't even show up. Whether that was by instruction or fear, no one could say. My wife, she lingered. Technically, she wasn't terminated. There were no formal words like dismissed or let go. That's not how reputational amputations work. Instead, her badge still worked. Her email still logged in. Her chair still sat behind her glass-walled corner office. But no one invited her to meetings. No one included her on group planning threads. Her name was missing from the Q3 investor prep email. The seat at the weekly strategy summit? Reassigned due to portfolio shift. She tried to recover. Reached out to 2 board members that afternoon. Left voice messages. One texted back 4 hours later with a single word, received. That was it. No explanation. No warmth. Not even a lie to hold on to. And then, the final blow landed. That same afternoon, an internal bulletin announced that Lornis Equity Holdings had officially increased its position in the firm, expanding its stake and triggering a fast-track decision window for leadership integration. The memo didn't mention Carson or her, but everyone knew. Lornis had moved forward. Without them, she read it from her desk, the window blinds casting faint lines across her face. Her inbox dinged, another calendar update she hadn't been included in. She scrolled, scrolled, scrolled. Still nothing. In the firm's internal portal, her photo had been shifted. Not removed, just relocated. Lower down, below the fold, under a new category, Legacy Project Leads. She wasn't fired. She was ghosted, corporate style. Erased with precision. No funeral. No flair. Just absence. Later that day, she ordered lunch like usual. Tried to pretend nothing had changed. Sat alone in the rooftop garden, phone in hand, waiting for someone, anyone, to text her something normal. Nothing came. She looked out over the city she once called her kingdom, her empire of curated respect. Her name had been printed in magazines. Her face had been on panels. She'd once walked through these halls like she couldn't be touched. Now, the only ones speaking her name were the ones whispering about how fast she'd fallen. No one mentioned me. That was the final insult she never saw coming. Not that I destroyed her, but that I didn't even have to say a word to do it. It arrived on a Thursday. No courier. No signature. Just a plain, cream envelope slipped into her office mail slot between a catered event flyer and a finance department memo. No markings. No return address. No seal. Her fingers hesitated over it for a second, like her body already understood what her mind hadn't caught up to yet. But she opened it anyway. Slowly. Carefully. Like it might explode. Inside, one sheet of paper. A high-resolution color printout. The image was perfectly framed. Centered. Unmistakable. Carson, mid-laugh. Teeth bared. Glass raised in triumphant sleaze. Her, shoulder to shoulder with him, smiling in complicity. Eyes lit. Lipstick perfect. And in the blurry background, just behind her, her husband. Me. Sitting quietly. One hand on the table. The other holding a phone. The screen unmistakably lit. App already open. Thumb frozen a fraction of a second before it touched the button. They'd caught the exact second the knife was sharpened, not swung. Below the photo, in small, serif type, a single line. We remember what you laugh at, and who you laugh with. That was it. No name. No threat. No apology. No signature. Just that image, and that sentence, and the silence that followed. She stared at it for a long time. Minutes. Maybe longer. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't run through the building trying to fix it like she used to when things cracked. She just sat there, alone, in that office that no longer received invites or calls or news. The afternoon light cut across her desk in harsh diagonal lines. Her reflection in the window was dim, tired, smaller than she remembered herself being. For the first time, she noticed how quiet it was. No calendar dings. No Slack pings. No assistant tapping on the glass asking if she had a moment. She had nothing but moments now, and all of them were echoing the same realization. Her future hadn't been taken. It had been given away, not in one grand betrayal, not in some malicious act of sabotage, but in a laugh. A careless, thoughtless, petty little laugh at the expense of someone she thought she didn't need anymore. One joke. One lean into the wrong man. One underestimation of the quietest person in the room. That's all it took. She folded the paper neatly, slid it back into the envelope, placed it in the top drawer of her desk next to a pair of cufflinks I'd once given her, in case you ever want to wear power for a day. She never had. Now she never would. There would be no second envelope. No more warnings. No court case. No scandal in the papers. Just that one moment, captured forever, when she mistook silence for weakness. And a man she once loved for a footnote. She never saw what I built, because she never bothered to look. And now, there was nothing left to see.